Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you guys today. I got Paul joining us for the first time. Paul and I go a ways back now. We've known each other for a few years, and I am excited to have you on the show. This is going to be awesome. We're going to be talking risk and reward. So while I am excited, y'all should be too. Make sure you're doing the things like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays on The Gold Mine and Fridays for the collective. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those as we go along. And yeah, super stoked. Paul, give me a quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff, and we will hit that conversation.
Hello, and thanks for having me. My name is Paul Wagman. I am a retired police detective and one of the founders and executive director of Wayfinders Wellness Society, which is a nonprofit just on the edge of town in Cochrane, just outside of Calgary, where we serve responders, military, and their family, those have suffered from service trauma like PTSD. We've got a variety of incredible workshops and peer support group that we do every 2 weeks online and in person. It goes all across Canada. And so we've really kind of seen quite a bit of growth in the service that we provide, and that's kind of my passion and what kind of fills my bucket these days.
Love it. We were just discussing in the green room before you jumped in here, Shaun, that he got to retire and be a cowboy. Like that's a pretty great place to be. How's life in the mountains out there, Shaun?
Things are good. I'm told that I might have a little bit of a delay right now or choppy, so I'm going to keep things briefer than normal, I suppose.
Roger that. Let's get right into it. So, risk and reward. The reason we haven't actually touched on this, I don't think, in quite a while. I think we did one episode on this last year, but it's been a while since we've hit on it, so I wanted to come back to it. And I want to get your guys' first thoughts right off the top of your head. Risk and reward. What are your initial thoughts on that? Paul, I'm gonna hit you up. What do you got?
Well, yeah, no, that's an interesting one. I think risk and reward is something which we kind of, is like a game of cards. We kind of hold, the cards close to our chest, and we're very, very cautious because we could have an element of hurt if we risk too much. We leave ourselves more susceptible to harm, and for people to kind of come closer than our boundaries may allow us to. That's one of my thoughts when I think of risk and reward.
I love it. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
So I made some notes. I sent them to you.
Saw that.
It looks like this. And so we've got risk and reward, risk versus reward, risk equals reward, risk worth the reward. And so I'm going to quickly give a interpretation of how we got to this risk and reward sort of sentence or phrase or term. And I believe it's a modern simplification of a broader financial and philosophical concept developed over centuries. In finance, it started in the 1950s, with the risk-return trade-off, which was developed by an economist by the name of Harry Markowitz. But you can trace it much further back to the phrase, fortune favors the bold, which was written by the Roman poet Virgil. And so risk and reward, risk versus reward, risk equals reward, risk, is it worth the reward? These are all parts of the two simple words, which are risk, reward.
Bam. I love this. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I was thinking about it earlier in the fact that, fortune favors the bold is a great quote, but risk, if you risk nothing, then you can't be rewarded by anything. And we're going to go into this first video, and then we're going to get some thoughts on it and see where it goes. Here we go.
If you laugh, you risk appearing to be a fool. If you weep, you risk appearing to be sentimental. If you reach out for another, you risk rejection. If you love, you risk not being loved in return. If you place your dreams in front of the crowd, you risk ridicule. If you go forward in the face of overwhelming odds, you risk failure. But risk must be taken, for the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing has nothing, does nothing is nothing. Well, in the world of ego is nothing. That person may avoid suffering, pain, and embarrassment, but that individual will not learn, love, change, feel, or grow. Only the person who takes risks is truly free.
That's a good setup there. Paul, what are your thoughts?
That's a good one. No, I think if we don't, what I really take away from that is if we don't risk, then we don't offer ourselves the opportunity to grow. And it's really through what we risk, and even through those failures when we risk something, when we don't achieve what we've ultimately set out to accomplish, that we can truly, when we have those failures, that we can truly experience, those things that we can take as learning lessons and build on those things or grow from those things and nurture them in order to be successful in the future.
Yeah, Shaun, what are your thoughts on this?
I think in order to understand risk, you've got to risk. And if you always sit in a safe place with no risk, then you can't even spell the word risk. And so to get in the game, you've got to get in the risk game in order to understand whether you like risk or not. But I think more importantly, by getting into the risk game, it tells you a lot about yourself, your conviction, your purpose, your sense of why you're here. I think, as the individual in the video stated, without risking something, without risking smiling and appearing to be maybe the fool in the moment, then you are denying yourself of the future opportunities that you don't understand yet. You've got to risk something in order to understand everything. And I make that point because if you just exist in a state of no risk, you exist in a place of constant safety, you are static. You are not growing. And so by not accepting risk, what you are accepting is status quo. And if you're in your 20s or 30s, welcome to your 70s and 80s, where you're still in your 20s and 30s. So what do you want in life? It requires risk to see the fullness of it.
I wonder, on that note, if taking no risks is a risk in itself, because we don't know how that's going to turn out. You never know when your life is actually going to end, or whether or not, like you may say, like, hey, I'm going to take my 20s off and just try to relax after school, or just try to find a safe, steady job, or whatever you want to do that seems like low risk. But in doing so, you're actually risking your talents, risking your capabilities, risking how magnificent you could become. What do you guys think on that, Paul?
I think you're right. I think as we grow older and our experiences give us wisdom, that wisdom will tell us that we do have to make those risks, and that by through those experiences, we've tested the waters, and that we need to be able to establish a certain degree of trust in ourselves through our wisdom. And I'm gonna reflect on a subject of my, I guess, area of my expertise when it comes to recovering or taking looking a look at the journey through mental health. When someone is injured from an injury or experience trauma, they often are very well overwhelmed and overloaded with that experience and trauma, or they tuck it down into a place where they don't want to access it. In order for that to actually be accessed, there's an element of risk you have to take in order to be able to overcome that trauma and to process it in a healthy way. If you never take that risk, then you're never going to get the rewards of being healthy. It's the same sort of thing with physical exercise. If you don't push yourself and actually make that decision to walk out the door and go to the gym and engage in a level of fitness, you're not going to reap the rewards. So I guess the ultimate question is, how comfortable are we with the reward system that we're going for? Do we want rich rewards in our life? If we do want rich rewards, I'm going to suggest that we do have to risk a certain degree in order to get those things.
Interesting, Shaun. Thoughts on this?
Couple of things. One is the narrative around risk and how it is not connected tightly enough or connected closely enough to the follow-on word reward. A lot of people talk about risk, but in the same breath don't say reward. They just talk about risk. Risk, risk, risk. It's so risky. It's so scary. I don't even want to start because of the risk. The sentence should be, it is going to be challenging, but the reward is worth the risk, rather than flipping those two words around and talking about the risk first, rather than talking about the reward first. Now, the problem with that, when you change the sentence structure into the reward is worth the risk, is that then can become conflated or distorted to a sense of fantasy based reward, as in, I'm going to get that Lamborghini by the end of this year if I just risk things a little bit. That over conflated sense of the reward. The reward isn't the Lamborghini. The reward is the risks that you're going to take and work through and learn along the way as part of the path or the journey that you're on to become a better human being. And so I think the sentence needs to be, the reward is worth the risk, but the reward has to be contained in a reasonable manner so that it doesn't become an artificial pie in the sky sort of scenario.
It reminds me of, the ends justify the means, right? Is the fact that people do kind of anything if they believe that the ends will justify it in the end. But what you're trying to, at least I believe what you're trying to say is that you have to justify those ends before you set up the means. Am I about that right?
Yeah, and but another little, it's not even a nuance. Another add-on to that is, I don't want anyone out there to misinterpret what we're saying from the start of this show, as far as I'm concerned. The risk and the reward, generally speaking, is often focused on the individual. So when the topic of risk equals reward, risk versus reward, risk reward, most people in their minds, or when they interpret this, they make it about them. Whereas I'm suggesting that the risk is worth it for the team's reward. What we're doing right now, risky in a small way, exposing ourselves to the internet, exposing our thoughts, maybe saying something dumb, maybe smiling and being considered as a fool. What we're doing right now, to some degree, is small risk. But the reward, though we are gaining from it personally by facing new wisdoms, by absorbing new thoughts, by trying to live a better life through different ideas like Paul will bring, that's minor risk with minor reward. I see the minor risk worth it, not just for me, but for the bigger reward to the team. Because as we know, people who will track this will inject these kind of ideas into their life to see if it works for them. And so risk versus reward, or equals reward, is not just you. It's more commonly about the team in my world. And so anyone who's struggling to change their way, apply a little bit of risk into their life to become a better person, if you're struggling to do that, make it about the team. Make it about everyone around you. Take that risk to push the team up, and in so doing, you'll push yourself up.
Mm-hmm. I like where this is going. Paul, thoughts on that?
No, I think that's good feedback. I think those are two good perspectives, looking at it from a team perspective and then an individual perspective. I think from an individual perspective, when you do risk an element or gamble an element of risk away. You do have to, you've got your boundaries set up with those things which keep you safe. And it's the same thing within a team. You don't want to necessarily look like a fool when you're contributing within a team, but you want to risk enough to maybe, um, you know, put it out, on the edge and contribute to a team, and creating a team dynamic will allow for everybody on that team to participate and feel comfortable if the leader of that team, not necessarily management, but if the leader of that team creates an environment where people feel safe to be able to gamble the level of risk, their personal level of risk, to be able to elevate the team and contribute to a team. I think that's a really dynamic perspective to look at.
I'm liking where this is going, and I'm wondering why earlier, Shaun, you had kind of brought up that perhaps we look at risk first. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that like societally, when I first thought of risk and reward, to use this as a topic, my first thought was, okay, well now we have to risk something in order to pull this off. Why is that our first thought? Why do you guys think I should say? Why do you think it's our first thought? Shaun, I'm going to come to you first, and then we'll jump around. What do you got?
Sure. My first thought in my head is this: like historically, or as humans, as a species, how did it all begin? How did someone, maybe in a cave with his caveman club, how did he or she come up with the idea that whatever I'm about to risk is worth the reward? And I believe it's this. I really do believe this to be true. And I feel like historically, it's never shifted. I think that at our core, we are responsible to provide to the people at the campfire or in the cave. As an example, my caveman wife would have to, cook the brontosaurus. And so it's my job to go out there and risk to provide for others. What I don't think was very common in our history is individual people, tens of thousands of years ago, roaming singularly across the plains, hunting, providing for themselves, surviving, maybe bumping into a person or two, and then disconnecting from them to continue on their solo life, risking and rewarding themselves. I don't think that's how we came up. We came up as clans, we came up as tribes, we came up as small families. We came up risking for the benefits of the team in order to strengthen it, in order to expand it, in order to meet other circumstances boldly and face them in that risky moment, and reward by perhaps combining two tribes together or two clans together. I think at our core, our DNA, or our central spirits, we are built to risk and reward for the team. I think we've lost our sense of that in our modern society. So when you think back to tradesmen or some of the early adventurers that jumped on wooden sailing ships and sailed for months until they bumped into another land, the reason they were doing that is because they were curious explorers, but they were going out, risking their lives to bring back something for the team, the country, their king, whatever it is. And so, again, at our core, I think that humans will take risks far more quickly or far more easily, or engage in that process with more conviction when the risk is about bringing it back to the team.
I really like that. Paul, you got any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I really like that too. I've got a different perspective that popped into my mind when I was reflecting on that there too. I was thinking more of innate nature. Wayfinders, one of our most popular workshops that we offer, is an equine wellness workshop, which is based on communication and based on learning the different tools that you can learn when you apply your skills with horses and doing join up, and we really look closely at the nature of a horse from a prey animal compared to a predator, and really their ability to risk certain things within that herd, and for us as humans who are a predator to be able to encroach into their space and just to see what their reactions are. And I think we are very innate an animal species in being able to develop our risk and reward system and apply that risk and reward methodology because we are animal in behavior and because we're driven by the need to be able to survive. So I think the more that we practice that depends on our hierarchy structure within the community and within that team. You know, like we were talking a little bit about earlier, some people have higher demands because they work in a team environment where they have to risk more and accomplish more for themselves as a team. And sometimes that takes a little bit more from an individual to contribute than somebody that's just merely trying to survive. But I think it's an innate ability, something that we learn and then something that we practice as we kind of grow older through our experiences.
Mm. I, as you guys were talking there, I was thinking about the fact that Shaun, you had mentioned modern society, and I think that our our rewards have become too easy. Like they don't require risk as much anymore. They require cash or they require Amazon or whatever. But the the overall reward became the risk got taken away from the reward itself, and therefore we no longer seek that risk to gain that exorbitant reward.
Mm.
Now, what do you guys think on that one, Shaun? Gonna come back to you.
I think you're heading in the right direction, but not a fully a full loop as far as I'm concerned, because I'd just like to take it one step further and suggest that, again, in our modern society, the risk and reward ratio or the risk reward model is distorted as contextualized against a more historical model, where as a pig farmer, you had to work like harder than most people on the planet have to work several hundred years ago just to get by. But today, you can, we'll call it, have a lucky break where you say one thing on the internet or you do one thing on the internet. Maybe it's a TikTok video where you go from pig farmer to celebrity, and you go from a pig farmer salary or existence to now you're the man in a flash. And it's hardly earned as contextualized against what the pig farmer had to do several hundred years ago. And so our distorted sense of risk and reward has been virally spread across the internet, so that today, as an example, a lot of young people who have not begun to work hard in their lives are looking for ways to not work hard in their lives and are clinging to the hope that just that one thing, if I just say that one thing right, if I just get my video just enough sparkles in it, enough fireworks in the background, that's going to be my lucky break. And then I'm set for the rest of my life. I just need that jackpot. I need that payoff in my video. But that isn't the way, as we all know. The path of consistent discipline, doing the work, staying true to the correct trajectory of a righteous compass is where the real rewards are. The risk is knowing that you can stay in the game as long as it takes to get the reward versus not taking the risk and simply dabbling on the jackpots.
I do remember prior to the internet, the story was that you were going to win the lottery, right? The key was that we're talking about the same thing though.
And I always used to call that the fool's tax. The
Fool's
lottery
tax,
ticket
yep.
is the fool's tax.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I really like where the conversation is going. I don't think there's a lot of shortcuts you can take in life. I think if you take shortcuts, then you miss the wisdom of being able to develop the tools to be able to navigate things and to be able to weather the storms as they come up. And, I liken this again to when you're injured, with a trauma, you have to be able to go through the actual roadmap of recovery. You have to be able to unload the baggage and the trauma, do the hard work, and actually put in the time and the effort in order to release that stuff. And then once that's done, you got to be able to learn the skills in order to cope and manage the tools and tips and tricks to navigate when those things kind of come up again, when the symptoms come up, because they will. They're going to rear their ugly head, and you're going to be able to need to know what to do in order to manage these things. And so when we're talking about risk and reward, the real thing that stands out here is there is no shortcuts to hard work and work ethic, because the rewards are going to be reaped by the amount of work that you can put into it. And so I think, I learned at a very young age, because I was a competitive volleyball player, played club volleyball for the University of Calgary when I was younger, and much, much younger. And I learned a lot of very valuable tools. And that is that work ethic, to be able to know how far you can push something to be able to accomplish those things. And those things are the greater rewards and those greater successes in your life. So it really is one of those things that needs to be a fire that's lit within, but you need to be able to find what your capacity is when it comes to risking those, to being able to make those risks to find those rewards.
I'm reminded of a line. I saw it on a clip at one point in time. I think I used it on one of the gold mines. Was are you willing to sprint if the distance is unknown? And something along those lines of like, are you willing to put it all in? Are you willing to risk everything you know for what it is you want deep in the future? I love where this is going. Now, I have
Mind if I play with that for a sec, though?
hit it. Yeah, man.
Because that's really good. That's really important, for sure. I think everyone should pick up what you just put down, as long as they know why they're sprinting. Because if I just grab 100 random people in my town and say sprint until you see white dots and pass out and bomb it, how many people will take me up on that? Not that many. Just lunatics like me, maybe. But I understand the game, because I've been in the game of risk a long time. Risking myself, risking it for others. Risk. I understand risk better than quite a few people. Maybe not as well as others. But you got to understand the game of the question that you just threw out there, Chance. The would you sprint forever for no reason? So most people need a reason. They need to understand why they're going to stand on that start line and consider your question. And very few people will take it serious unless they know the why of the moment. And if you're not explaining the why, and they're not explaining the why to themselves, who's going to pick up what you're putting down?
That's a great clarification. Yeah. Paul, you got any thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely true. And I think when, people are leaders, they're asked upon to show that wisdom and to be able to deliver those bits of, those nuggets of wisdom that can allow people to transform into what they need to be, to be able to find their inspiration, to be able to find their wisdom, and to be able to see what their meters are on their ability to accomplish what their goals are in life. And I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head there when it comes to risk and reward. So no, I just love the conversation. I think it's going in a great direction, and good reflection. Thank you for that one.
Yeah. Now I got another video here. Shaun, you got any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, here we go. It follows along the lines of what we're talking about too. So just
say hi to the Amazon delivery driver and smile at them. Say thank you to the barista and say a few nice words to them. Say hi to the bus driver and smile at them. Thank the postman. You are working on your happiness. Those little things, they are not trivial. There's a network in your brain called the sociometer, right? It's constantly detecting your external world for threats. And when it receives positive information, like a smile, like a bit of a nod, a handshake, it sort of relaxes. Your stress levels go down. You feel a sense of connection with the world around you. Coming back to control, you feel that the external world is safe.
Safe, yeah.
I've got a degree of control. There is order in the world. Let's focus on these simple things you can do each day.
Now, I bring this one up specifically because when I first started thinking about risk, I was thinking about when I went through the whole recovery process, PTSD, and all the doing my major depressive episodes. And in those moments, I have to risk putting myself out there to fail in order to get better at being relaxed in those positions. And so those little things that he's talking about, smiling and waving and um, being emotionally vulnerable, I guess, in the moment is a risk in itself. What are you guys' thoughts on this one, Paul?
Yeah, I think perspective, that's one thing, is maintaining that perspective shift. And that's one of the biggest things in recovery is having those tools on, on your belt, being able to know when things kind of elevate, to be able to bring things down, with breathing techniques, with being able to engage people peaceably with a smile and lengthen your fuse. But it is with gratitude and with graciousness that you can maintain the positive perspective of of how you look. And that's one thing, is being able to change your perspective when things are negative, and you're kind of spiraling down that rabbit hole. You need to be able to grasp onto something, and that's part of, you know the journey of mental wellness, is being able to have those tools that you can grasp onto quickly. And sometimes it's just as simple as being able to engage with our community, with those people, in a kind way, but not being overwhelmed. So it's a delicate subject, I think, because you have to know your limitations, you have to know what your triggers are, but you have to be able to risk being able to engage with others in order to practice those skills, and re-engage with our community, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
I like it. Uh, a couple of years ago, I believe I started saying generally along the lines of, what you all need to try doing a little bit more is smiling. Take on the smile challenge. Stop being so frowny. At
Mhm.
my natural state is I have a bit of a stern look about me. I have a little bit of a intensity about me. And so even when I'm just kind of chillaxing, leaning against a wall in the shadows with some brohemos, I'm a bit intense. I give off a little bit of intensity. And it's not to scare anyone away. It's my default mode. But I know that. I've just been told it so many times. And I recognize it in myself. I guess I'm an intense dude. So much like I recommend to everyone that you should try smiling more, I have to tell myself that as well. I have to project out into the external world, much like the video was basically portraying as I saw it, is we are responsible to project ourselves out into the external world. Thank the barista when they give you the coffee. Do you know why I know that's important? Because I owned a coffee shop for a couple of years. I was a freaking barista in my own coffee shop. I understand the interaction between humans and how the smallest of details, we're all observing them all the time. And when a customer would come up to me and start the interaction with a smile and a nod, whether they knew me or not, they were off to a good start for their day, and I was off for a good start for my day. And where's the downside? By projecting some positivity out into the world, being thankful, as our boys, our sons know, be polite to the world.
Yeah, I I could not agree more. One of my biggest ones that I project regularly, and I've even explained this to my sons, is eye contact. And it's amazing how little eye contact there is around just when you're out and about. And there's when I go get a coffee, I look directly at the person, and I always use the word howdy because I've seen this a lot where people will go into a store or they'll go into a restaurant or whatever, and they will immediately begin ordering. They won't even say hi. They'll just, I'd like give me whatever. So I always make sure to hit them with a howdy first. We can
Do you know why
engage them.
do you know why that's annoying? Why someone stepping up to the barista and saying, "Give me a coffee," and not looking you in the eyes and just basically demanding of you what they want? It's because it makes me feel like I now work for them, that we're not a team. that we're not in a moment, that we're not in a relationship, that we're not sharing the same human experience, this common moment in the now. It makes me feel like they're my boss. And to some degree, they kind of are, because that is kind of retail. That is the business that I was in, was I kind of now work for you in this moment. But it's the spirit of that relationship in the moment that can make or break the moment. The risk is the individual who's ordering a coffee from me has to risk being nice when the 10 times prior that morning, when they were nice to someone, they got a sneer or a frown or a scolding, perhaps. So now they're making one more risk on one more dude to try to be nice. And the reward is that we get to share a cool moment together if we both do it right. But the punishment is if that person doesn't do it right, maybe I'm going to be the 11th person that sneers at them. And so all of our relationships, all of our moments, all of the present interactions in our lives are a risk. Even when they're long-standing friends, there's still a hint of a risk that when we put ourselves out, genuinely, authentically, try to be a good person, there's a small risk that you're going to maybe get squashed like a bug. But the reward in that moment is later. You get to think about that. How you did it wrong, maybe how they did it wrong, how you would do it better in the future. Next time this shows up, I'm going to try a different angle. There's always a reward. It's whether you dig deeply enough for the silver lining in the risk.
Yeah, 100%. Paul, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, what really stands out with that in my mind is you can't be afraid to fall flat on your face and fail. You know what I mean? Like, you actually have to be able to give it a good, valiant effort, you know, and there's really no shortcuts because, like, in our life, you know, and it kind of goes back to how you want to be treated. That was one thing I wanted to kind of touch upon is like, is society these days is getting more and more distant. I think because of, you know, COVID isolated us and took away a lot of our social experiences and our sense of community that we had. So it's taking a long time to kind of get back, you know, to a sense of community within our just living within a city or within a municipal area. You know, people are on edge. People, you know, feel almost like they have something to lose if they don't communicate and relate to people, you know, and risk an element of their own personal character in order to relate to other people. So they're more hesitant to engage with others, to be able to join clubs, to be able to get out of their house, to be able to go out and eat in public. You know, there's a lot more people ordering food in, and people are afraid to get out. And so I think what we're seeing now is people afraid to make that risk because of the social element of falling flat on your face. Or, you know, of course, we had COVID. There was a physical harm that occurred, you know, when COVID was out there. And you still see people now walking around with masks on and, you know, getting their vaccine. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of fear in society right now. People are feared, you know, are fearful to make those risks and to actually try to gain those rewards.
Yeah, I was as you guys were talking, I was thinking about Kutushi. I was thinking about jujitsu because I always think about jujitsu, but yeah, in the terms of, I mean, the military, in terms of combat sports, in terms of anything, there's the feint, right? If you want to draw out the enemy, then you're going to have to use a feint, or you want to use a feint. I can't say have to. You want to use a feint, but that feint has to be real. Like it can't. It's not going to work if it's a half kind of thrown off to the side, like a little toss out on a hook. That's not going to get somebody to bring their hand up. It's got to be a real punch in order to get the response that you want. And I think in terms of risking, even if you were throwing a punch, I have to open myself up to be hit in order to hit somebody else. And I think I think it applies in a larger sense to risk and reward, in the fact that if you want something, even if you want something later on down the road, and you might have to use some misdirection or redirection of something, redirection of assets, it's got to be a full redirection. It can't be a half-assed redirection, if that makes sense. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, I won't play with it too long other than feints aren't for the faint of heart. And so who are you in the moment? Why are you there? Why would you even consider using a feint? If you're not fully invested in your game, whatever your game is, your life, your trajectory, your path, your reason for existence, if you're not fully invested, then you are faint of heart. And so why is that? Why do some people fade over time and don't leave their house and have to order in meals and so on and so forth? I'm calling it faint of heart for a reason. And I think that no one has to exist in that state. No one has to be static in their existence. You can always move forward. You can always grow. You can always pursue more excellence. And so when you consider the idea of how we started off the podcast with risk and reward, generally speaking, in the 1950s, the phrase grew out of the financial industry. Then what you can think of is most people have a portfolio, their life. And some will be satisfied with sitting on their, we'll call it the nest egg of their life, and hoping that it grows. And some will actively pursue their portfolio's growth by making investments, by making risks, by not gambling, but taking risks that cause greatness in their life that is not sitting on a nest egg. So as a portfolio, risk and reward, you have to ask yourself, are you satisfied with getting a 1% return in life by just sitting and hoping that there's some growth? Or will you take matters into your own hands and start making some moves within your life to maybe get 8% return, maybe 12% return? That's a really important question that I think everyone should ask themselves. Now I'm going to sweep that off to the side and then propose that how you invest in life is observed by other investors. So if you're sitting on the nest egg and your friends see you sitting on the nest egg, they might be more prone to begin to sit on their nest egg rather than aggressively pursuing their portfolio to expand it into something more than it currently is. By aggressively pursuing, you might just encourage everyone around you to realize that they too can risk to some degree so that they see more greatness in their life.
I'm loving where this is going. Paul, you got thoughts?
I'm loving that as well. I think that's really, really important. It's what you invest in. If you invest in yourself and in your future, then really the rewards are yours personally to take, and you can apply that again personally. And I think it's important to apply that personally because you really have to take care of yourself and identify what your ability to manage risk and reward is before you can have the confidence to do that in a team environment, because otherwise you're just kind of winging it and kind of taking risks that might not be safe risks when you're doing that within a team. But I think when you look at the financial association or comparison, that really sets a good standard or a good framework for applying risk and reward to anything else, except for the fact that when we do this personally, whether that be in with our investing in our relationships with loved ones or, with others, or whether that's, doing that with our mental health. We sometimes don't know what is tangible until we know what is tangible. And that could be, for example, in a relationship, in love. Or you have to be able to know what to invest and how to be able to get back in that relationship. That's why, we talk about the love languages and understanding your loved one. So I think what we when we're talking about risk and reward, these things can be applied to lots of things. And like I say, when we're looking at love, we need to understand the waters that we're jumping into, and do the research. That's why, the five love languages, for example, is a book that gives us a good understanding as to what that environment is and what the risk and reward is in being able to engage in relationships with those that we love.
Mm. I was looking at it from. I love where you're going with that in terms of relationship investment, and I 100% agree. I was looking at it from in the terms of depth as well, because if the nest egg is a good idea, if all things stay the same, right? If I have a large chunk of, let's say, money, and I want to save this for my future, and I'm getting a 1% return, and everything stays the same, okay, that should be all right. The problem is nothing ever stays the same. Change is the only constant in life, and therefore you need a larger return because things get more expensive. And if you want to relate this to health, or relate this to mental health even as well, if you don't do anything with your physical health, life gets more expensive later on, because you're going to have
Hmm.
physical issues, you're going to have difficulties, that kind of thing. So I'm really liking where this is going. Shaun, you had a thought?
I do. So, one of the critical aspects of a portfolio is that you observe your portfolio. I suggested that if you're sitting on your nest egg, not taking any risks, if you're just static and hoping, literally crossing your fingers that you get a 1% return over per annum, that's hopes, dreams, wishes. Everyone who's got a portfolio who is to some degree financially successful actually watches their return rate. They track the market, they track their portfolio, they trend. In our human existence, in our singular journey, that's called reflection. You are looking at your portfolio return through reflection. You have to look at it that day, but you have to look at it historical context as to how have I done over the last year. And so it's not enough to have, we'll call it a nest egg, and just sit on it. And it's not enough to go out there and have risk and hope that your portfolio grows. What you do have to do, if you've got any financial sense or any understanding of risk and reward, is you have to do your thing, and then you have to reflect on the outcomes, the results, the historical context of if you're choosing the right risks. And if you've chosen the wrong risks, no problem. You can see that in the financial charts of your portfolio. You can see that within the trends. And no one in any investment portfolio is so deep into an investment, or shouldn't be so deep into an investment, that it becomes personal and you lose your way, where your hopes just magnify to the degree where they become beliefs. It's easy to invest in something, lose some money, and then shift your money to something else that will make you money. Now, I'm using the financial terms, but we can easily shift all of that language into risk, reward, life trajectories, reflect, adjust, and move accordingly.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Paul, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you really need to know your environment, whatever environment you're getting into, to venture that element of risk. Whether it's financial, or you're talking about relationships, or we're talking about mental health. You have to be able to substantiate that investment, know the environment, but not dwell on it too. I think that's also key. Is people can get obsessed with things, and people can ruminate, And it's not healthy to be, obsessing and ruminating on things and allowing it to affect you. So, I think the flip side is you need to be educated enough to make those decisions and have the team or the people that can feed you the information, be that level of comfort that provides you the ability to make that decision. And then you make that decision and you stand behind it. You know what I mean? And you don't dwell on it or you don't worry about it. Because that's the next thing that I think when it comes to risk and reward is people can ruminate on it. They can play it back in their mind if they lose money or if they have suffered a mental health injury or trauma. They can play that thing back in their mind over and over and over and wonder why this, why that. But I think once that decision's made, you have to be able to move on from that decision and process it in a healthy way, and that's wisdom in making future risks and rewards, and as you kind of use your wisdom moving forward.
Love that. Shaun, what do you got?
Yeah, that's an excellent point by Paul. And I'm going to try to reframe it back into the financial world, which, is kind of how we started off the podcast to some degree. As I heard that, what I was thinking of, Paul is describing day trading. So if you're a day trader, what you do is you observe your financial portfolio and you're making adjustments in the real time. I see this happening, now I'm going to do that. I see that happening, now I'm going to do this. The day trader is someone who doesn't spend weeks or months reflecting on choices and then adjusting their portfolio. A day trader is not a long-term investment portfolio. A day trader is just the now, reacting, almost knee-jerk reacting sometimes to what they believe is happening. And some people get lucky with day trading, but most don't. And so it's always form the pattern, understand the trend over the long term, over the weeks, over the months to make adjustments. Don't exist every single day thinking that today didn't work out. Now I'm going to flip-flop and go in the complete opposite direction. That didn't work out. Now I'm going to flip-flop and I'm going to go in a completely different direction. I'm going to day trade my life's portfolio, flippity-flopping from one thing to another without ever giving it time to form a trend as to things like, well, does equine therapy work for me? Does XYZ modality work for me? If you only give it a one and done shot and then shrug your shoulders and think, that's dumb, I'll never do that again. Now you're a day trader. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm tracking. I'm really, really enjoying this. And I think it's a beautiful point in the fact that I think it needs to be, you need to play with both sides of it. It's not just one or the other, right? You have to be able to think in depth. You got to be able to think in terms of future forecasting a little bit of, you're seeing trends. It's kind of going this way. Okay, well, I should probably go this way. But at the same time, there's spikes in the market, right? Some things happen. If you're working on your relationship and all of a sudden your significant other wants a divorce, that's going to change things immediately. And you got to be in that moment to figure it out. But you still got to be able to reflect on the length of said relationship or the length of time you've been investing in that particular genre. I think I'm loving where this is going. I really am enjoying this quite a bit. Paul, you got any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is to know when to take it on the chin, and then just kind of bow out and take another tactical perspective, and realize that sometimes things work out for a reason. Now you've got time. Time gives you more options, and options, will give you more ability to make future decisions that will be beneficial. So being able to take a loss, to take one on the chin, is just as important as to take a win. And that's just as important in the game of risk and reward. Taking a loss and being able to learn from it, and gain wisdom will be something that will be just as valuable as a win.
I like it. Now we are just about an hour. Any other thoughts on this? I was going to get into some final thoughts for the afternoon. I really do appreciate the convo. We went down a bunch of different roads and I loved it. It was awesome. It's super fun. Any final thoughts? Anything still bubble in the back of your brain on risk, reward, anything at all? Paul, I'm going to hit you first.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing that stands out is that people shouldn't be afraid to try. And I'm going to put this into a personal perspective and just share that when I was recovering from my operational stress injury, I was very, very hesitant to try things, new skills that would provide me techniques to be able to, like I said, put those tools on your tool belt. And it took everything for me to bring myself to try these things. And I think we need to be able to risk when it comes to relationships, when it comes to our mental health. We need to be able to kind of go with our hearts and go with our guts. I think the gut feeling, we never really touched on that, but the gut feeling can have a lot to say about protecting yourself. And a lot of times you need to be able to go with your gut and just push yourself a little bit further into those uncomfortable situations, because you're going to, reap some rewards if you push yourself and gamble that little bit of risk.
Love it. Shaun, final thoughts?
So much like Paul, I think that anyone who has faced risk and understands the rewards of risk, either for themselves or for the benefit of others, over time can be worn down by the amount of risk that they will take on, either for themselves or others. And so there is a corrosive element of constant risk acceptance. But much like a portfolio, it's our job to observe our risk state, how eager we are to accept risk, and why are we eager to risk? Or why have we stopped accepting risk? These are all questions that we should be asking ourselves on a pretty regular basis. Maybe not like a day trader every single day you're asking yourself this question, but observe your pattern in respect to risk and reward. And again, the corrosive nature of too much risk can put you in a place where your mental health can suffer to some degree. And so at some point prior to that, you were pretty good at risk and reward mitigation or management. And I'm not referring to anyone in particular. I'm talking to the internet as a whole. At some point, you were pretty good at managing your risk and reward. And then at some point, you weren't as good. In the future, you can be just as good or better if you just simply get on the right track for you, with the understanding that life requires risk in order to experience more life.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I was trying to create my final sequence of my final sentence here that I always like to do in the last little bit, but basically this is what I've come to, is that we need to risk what we know in order to learn something new. We need to risk what we just learned in order to build upon it so that we can gain the reward of growth from all of that. So thanks everybody for the conversation. Thought that was awesome. We'll see everybody next week. Chimo.